One of my favorite activities of the season is carving pumpkins. I love the creativity and artistic expression, but I really treasure the deeper lesson. There's nothing about the outside of a pumpkin that can get you ready for what's inside. Once you get through what might be a surprise, there's something wonderful and delicious, the seeds of greatness. As we make these amazing hand pies together, let's try to remember that the people we love might have more going on inside than we can see on the surface. Let's give them some room and support on their journeys, and in time, the real beauty inside will come out. I'm Jenny Randolph. Welcome to this day. We are just a few days away from Halloween, and I am thrilled to be sharing this recipe with you. These pumpkin hand pies have a little something special because we use salted caramel chips in them, and they turn out so spectacular. So let's jump right in and get started making these amazing pumpkin pasties. So the first thing that we want to do, as always when we're baking, is to preheat our oven. This time around, it needs to be at 400 degrees, and that's gonna make sure that they rise and they brown and they're just gonna be beautiful. Now we need to make our crust, and this is a little bit different than my usual standard pie crust. And when I'm baking, I like to be exact, and this is the best way to get a consistent turnout every single time is to weigh your flour. So a cup of flour is 120 grams. We want a cup and a half, so that would be 180 grams. So I'm gonna just turn on my little kitchen scale. We're just gonna put in the flour until we see 180 grams. Pretty simple. To our flour, we wanna add 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of sugar. Give that a little bit of a mix. Now I like to use a food processor for this, and you're gonna see why in just a second. So we're gonna add our dry ingredients right to the food processor. I have the blade attachment on the bottom of it. Just dump that in. You saw in the intro that I cut up 1 stick of butter, or 1/2 cup, and an entire block of cream cheese. And that's what we're gonna be adding to our dry mixture. It doesn't have to be little tiny chunks, but it does help if it's cut up a bit. Make sure that it's tight because this is gonna be exciting. So we're just gonna go ahead and pulse it. Now something amazing is gonna happen. You're gonna watch all of these dry ingredients turn into a dough. We don't need any additional liquid for this pie crust. Now you can see why I like to use the food processor. If you don't have a food processor, you can always use your mixer, you can use a blender, but it needs to have that power behind it so that you really get this dough and everything gets incorporated. Now what we wanna do is we wanna take a little bit of plastic wrap because this dough needs to rest a little bit. Now we wanna just wrap the dough from one side to the other. Kind of squish it down and make a disc. Cover it up from the other side. Now I always like to kind of press it down once it's in there. I don't know, it just makes it easier. Now in order to make sure that our butter and our cream cheese stay cold, because that's kind of important as we're rolling this out, while I'm making the filling, I like to stick this in the freezer. Just don't forget that it's in the freezer, but if you do, you can always take it out, you can always thaw it out, it's okay. If you're feeling a little bit iffy, or if you are making the dough the day before, it's gonna be fine in the refrigerator. But since we're just doing this all in one fell swoop, stick it in the freezer while you make your filling. I have already measured out 1 cup of organic pumpkin puree, and I like the organic. I just feel like it tastes a little bit better and it always mixes up just right. But if you have a brand preference, go ahead and just use that. But I would stay away from the pumpkin pie filling that you use. Try to get actual canned pumpkin puree for this recipe. It's just gonna hold up better, and it's gonna be a little bit more dense, and it's gonna hold up in the hand pies a lot better. So to our 1 cup of pumpkin puree, I'm gonna add an egg. I'm gonna add 1/4 of a cup of sugar. 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. We're gonna give this a real good mix. So this is an amazing dessert. I know we're making it for Halloween, but it's really nice to have for Thanksgiving and even through Christmas. You know, I love to eat seasonally, and I know the whole pumpkin thing and the whole pumpkin spice thing is really, we're really marketed to, and we're meant to feel like, oh, we have to have pumpkin everything. But I think also when we eat seasonally, we crave the stuff that pumpkins and squash and potatoes and all of that stuff as we head into the winter months. So don't be too shy about using pumpkin every once in a while. It really is good for you. It's super nutritious, and we don't have to be all crazy and commercial about it, you know, when we do our pumpkins. We can just have, you know, a subtle pumpkin flavor here and just have it be enjoyed without it being too overblown and too over commercialized. So now here comes the fun part. We have our dough. It's been sitting in the freezer for a few minutes and kept cold. And so we want to work not super fast, but we want to, you know, we want to move with a purpose when we're doing this, because we do want the butter and the cream cheese to stay fairly solid, fairly cool. I'm going to take a bit of flour. We want to put a little bit more flour on the surface of it, spread it around, and start rolling it out from the center, just like that. Now, because we're making hand pies and we're gonna be cutting them out, this doesn't have to be a perfect circle, but it does help to keep it kind of circular in shape. It's just gonna be easier for you to roll out. But if it gets a little wonky, don't worry, because we're gonna have to re-roll this as we cut our pieces out anyway. So now that we have that, I always like to make sure that it's not sticking on the bottom, and see, it is sticking just a little bit. So we're gonna roll it back up. We're gonna put some more flour underneath there, turn it around. Be careful as you're adding flour. We don't want to incorporate too much more flour in this, but we also want to make sure that it doesn't stick. So just like a pinch at a time. When you see they're sticking, or there's a place that's sticking, or if it's sticking to the roller at all, you just want to make sure that you're going to be able to get them up once we cut them out. So we're looking for about 1/4 inch thickness in our pie crust. Push that back down. This is pretty forgiving. Pie crust is usually pretty forgiving. You don't want to overwork it because you don't want a tough pie crust, but you know, you can get it to where you want it to be without too much effort. That looks pretty darn good. Now, you can make these any size you want. If you have a biscuit cutter and if you want to make them small to where you can just pop them in your mouth, that's totally fine. But I like these guys big. I like you to be able to hold them in your hand, and I like for them to be an actual, well, kind of like the size of a piece of pie, right? So I always just get a bowl, like a regular cereal bowl that you have, and I start to measure out just like this. And I take a paring knife and I just cut around the bowl, just like that. And we lift it up, and you have it. And so we're gonna do that a few more times before we lift that guy up. So we were able to get 4 out of this one, and so we wanna pick up the scraps. And don't worry, we're gonna re-roll. And again, we wanna make sure that our surface is really floured. We're just gonna do that one more time. Now you will have a little bit of dough left over. You can make a little bit of one, or if you can get one more. Generally speaking, I just do about 6. But you know, that's up to you. If you wanna do a couple of little ones, you can do that too. So the first step before we fill them is to make sure that we have an egg wash on hand. So what I like to do is I like to take 1 egg and then just a bit of water, and go ahead and mix that up. Scramble it like you would scramble an egg. Now the egg wash is going to do a couple of things. It's going to help seal our hand pies as we fill them and turn them over, but it's also going to go right on top to make them really nice and brown and help our sugar to stick on the top. So I like to start with 2 tablespoons of the filling. I find that any more of that and it spills out the side, you're gonna be tempted to fill them a little bit more because it doesn't look like a lot of filling, but trust me, it is the perfect proportions. And to that, I'm going to add about 7 or 8 caramel chips to each one of these. Now here's where our egg wash comes in. We wanna just apply it all to the outside. And again, this is gonna act like glue to make sure that we have a really good seal on this. And you're gonna wanna fold it over, kind of press it down, but then you're gonna wanna pinch it together just like this. And then just to make it pretty, take a fork and make your little decorations. This also helps to really, really seal it. Because the last thing we want is the pumpkin filling to be spilling out everywhere. And we're just gonna continue to do that until they're all filled. So as we're filling these, I wanted to take a moment and talk about the idea that what we see on people's faces, their public persona, or what we see on the surface of people when we see them at work or at school or at church, sometimes there can be something really hurtful going on in their lives. We don't know everything that is going on in people's lives. And I just think that it's a really good opportunity, especially as we come into, you know, the season of giving, Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of it. And even Halloween, you know, when we have the parties and we're getting together. I just think it's a really nice reminder that you don't know what someone is really going through. You don't know if they have been diagnosed with something. You don't know if they are fighting a struggle with addiction. You don't know anything really. Sometimes, just like a pumpkin, we can see the surface and it looks really pretty and beautiful and awesome, and then you get inside and it's just a mess. Even if you think somebody has it completely together and they're looking good on the outside and they look like they're successful and they're doing really well, you don't know what's happening on the inside. So let's take a moment and just be gentle with each other, and remember, what you see isn't always what you get. So again, take the opportunity. Kindness doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost anything to be kind. It doesn't cost anything to be gentle. It doesn't really take away from who you are if you just give a smile or just give a minute. So we're all on this life's journey, and sometimes we have the hills and sometimes we have the valleys. So that's just what I was reminded of this today. And you know, as we're filling the insides of these, it just seemed like a really good moment to remind ourselves of that. So let's finish these off. I'm gonna cut some vent holes right in the top of each pie. This will also help it to not come out and split where we sealed them. Take our egg wash and lightly coat, and just take some sugar. Now you can use regular sugar. I'm using a decorative crystallized sugar today, but regular sugar will work just fine. Now it's into the oven at 400 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. My oven usually does these about 18 minutes or so. So just watch them. Once they get to that 15-minute mark, you want to just check and make sure that they don't get burnt and they're not too over-browned. So these turned out absolutely amazing. They're just the right kind of rustic. They're really pretty and they're gonna taste amazing. You're gonna wanna let these cool for 5 to 15 minutes or so, because they're gonna be really hard to move when they're hot. Also, you're gonna wanna wait a little bit until you bite into them, because that middle is gonna be really, really super lava hot. So take your time, let them cool, and move them to a nice serving tray. If you've enjoyed this video today, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. And if you're not, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I so enjoy doing this. It is something that is just fills my heart every time that I can share a recipe with you. So I really would appreciate that subscription. If you're already subscribed, go ahead and hit that notification bell, and then you'll know whenever I upload a video. Thanks so much for stopping, and happy Halloween.